Quaid Azam, Part 120. For the newly elected, there was now the lure of the office, with which came attendant authority and patronage inevitably thereafter. Competition for such positions became acute in turn, adding to the already existing separation of Hindus and Muslims. Lure of office pulled apart divisively, and here again Hindu-Muslim caste community sectional became the dominant interest. What followed then was again a complete domination of the transferred departments by just one community, as for example in Punjab, and a deliberate flaming of the communal passions for political advantage, as in the United Provinces, became oft-used the political tools, why cavil they still are. In consequence, what suffered was Hindu-Muslim unity. What got accented was the communal divide, for there had now come into existence an additional tool of contention. The Montfort reforms aimed at the evolution of power, but without diluting, in effect, any of the existing authority of the British Raj, or for that matter, in any manner reducing the effectiveness of the governance of India. But as in the political dynamics of the national struggle, here too provincial interest came in conflict with all India and the British to maintain their authority. Both central and provincial almost always relied more in the provinces, for in any event the reins of the centre they held firmly in their hands. The provinces were diverse and distant, but they must still be kept in tow, therefore they must submit. For achieving all this, apart from the landed rich, the British banked largely on Muslims, wherever they were in majority, and in those provinces too where they were not. In turn, for Muslims it was vital that separate electorates be retained, and it was only the government in Delhi that could do so. Here what greatly troubled them, the Muslims' leadership, was the prospect of Hindus someday getting control of the centre. Driven by the self-interest, Muslim provincial groups almost always aligned with the British government in Delhi, because for them a benign Delhi was surer guarantee of preserving their Muslim interests. Which is why the council reforms of 1919 also became a kind of watershed in Hindu-Muslim relations, because instead of cementing they contributed to further dividing them. While the council reforms of 1919 were not of any great help to Jinnah and his politics at the national level, Darki did thwart his ambitions. The Congress policy of non-cooperation had also prevented his entry into the National Assembly in 1920. His dilemmas were real and several. He just could not or would not adopt agitation methods of protest by fully lending his support to Gandhi's non-cooperation. Yet he could not afford to entirely alienate the Congress either. In summer 1921, Jinnah had visited England and lobbied for a constitutional response as an answer to Gandhi's civil disobedience. He suggested that if Punjab's wrongs were righted and the constitution amended to allow for acceptable provisional of provincial autonomy, and if some diarchy were introduced in central government, then India might be restored to normalcy. Yet again his appeal went unheeded, for even if there had existed some sympathy for what Jinnah was advocating, there was no mandate that Secretary of State Montague had to revise the constitution. A brief analysis of Punjab and Bengal, Muslim majority provinces and united provinces, politically crucial for the Muslims, would help us understand the situation better as it unfolded in 1920s. The Muslims of Bengal, like the Hindus, were not a monolithic united group. The Congress was suffragist under the leadership of C.R. thus succeeded in carrying several layers of the Muslim opinion along with them in 1923 provincial elections. All these had largely flowed from the Bengal Pact, However, diarchy was rendered as practically unworkable in Bengal because of the legislative unity of the Hindus and Muslims. But this very unity made a section of the Hindus uncomfortable. Undoubtedly, the Calcutta riots of the April 1926 contributed significantly to breaking his fragile alliance of the two communities. In consequence, by the time of 1926 Bengal elections, the two had fallen apart and the Congress got hardly any Muslim support. Despite the Bengal Pact of 1923 and by 26, and by 1926 Savarjists had also floundered in their effort to keep their Muslim supporters together.